Welcome back to our audience to the Go AI podcast. We have a very special guest today. Sir, would you mind introducing yourself, telling us who you are and who you're with?
Yeah, absolutely. My name is Braden Frame, and I'm the CEO of the Cartographers Group.
Brandon, you're going to have to tell a little bit more about your story and how your company, one, how did it start and how are you here at the AI? Because your background, again, I mean, firefighting, right? EMT.
Yeah, so I was on the job as a firefighter paramedic here in Central Texas for almost 13 years in total. Did a little paramedic work in between there, and I got hurt in late September of 2020, and it was my third line of duty injury. Had four surgeries. I've got like 8 inches of cadaver ligament stuck inside of me, and yada yada yada. A couple years later, never got to go back to work. So my time on the job, though, I had spent a lot of time in labor leadership and had done a lot of work in politics, both with my department and with departments kind of across the United States and Canada. And so I've kind of leaned on that experience in my post fire service world and started this company with a buddy of mine called the Modern Cartographers. It's where we first started. The 90-second background is cartographers is a fancy old word for map maker. And we had a theory that most politics, most people in ads, most people in marketing, run by the same rule book that got Columbus, where he thought he was in India, but he lands in like, New Hampshire, right?
Yeah.
And so those guys were making political decisions based off of, I looked at the stars and that's what the last guy did. And we're like, no, we're modern map makers. We're modern cartographers. We're looking at GPS. We're looking at data. We're going to find where people are at. They're not in their mailbox as often as they are on their phone. They're online. They're more digital. And so we coined the name Modern Cartographers where we started. We worked primarily with public safety, public sector, unions, police, fire, EMS, trying to improve public safety. And then as we expanded out, we took on a role building out another firm doing lobbying. So actually going to Congress and going to the Senate and going to the office of the president and trying to get better laws passed to keep communities safer. And so we put those two companies together, and that makes the Cartographers Group. It's been a path to get here. But I really enjoyed my time as a firefighter. I mean, I would go back to that work if I was physically able to. But since I can't, I now get to work with firefighters and police officers who are out there still doing the job and who are facing immense political pressure, budgetary pressures, internal challenges, firefighter cancer, PTSD, and law enforcement. I mean, there's so many different things that they're up against, and so I'm trying to leverage now our experience and our work and our understanding about technology and trying to bring that into a group and an audience that has traditionally been very slow to adapt to things. And so that's kind of what brings our company to the forefront of things right now.
And the name Modern Cartographers, you mentioned modern implies technological prowess. I think for most people nowadays, when they think of modern technology, they think of AI. Could you go a little bit more into how AI figures into your current work?
Yeah, absolutely. We are working and have been working for a number of years to try to stay at the forefront. And so, as OpenAI and ChatGPT kind of was starting to pick up steam, we were already starting to watch and see how that's evolving. And then now, where AI is almost everywhere, except in government, listening to your guys' previous, like it's very, very difficult to adapt. There's such a high risk concern there, but there's
Just
so much
so much red
private.
tape,
There
right? Like just
is.
so much red tape that takes so long. And when the technology moves so fast, I mean, it's a challenge.
And it's no different than what we faced in public safety 15 years ago when Facebook and social media became a thing. And
Oh,
there was a
talk.
period of time when public safety did not have Facebook pages. You didn't have Austin Fire Department on Facebook. Oh, that's
My
forbidden.
gosh.
We don't do that.
And
That's
look
for
at it
kids.
now. Look at the landscape now.
And now if you don't, it's unacceptable. We dedicate people to be public information officers who spend their day tweeting and posting on Instagram and making reels
I'm in
because that's
groups
yeah.
for at least for Louisville. Obviously, I'm not, not that I don't care about Texas, but I can only be in so many. And so the alerts and, just things at schools and places that my loved ones are at and I, are on my daily beat. It's so nice to be informed that way. So I
And that's
really
what the
appreciate
community
that.
expects.
Yeah.
That's what you
Yeah, you're
expect.
right.
That's what we all expect. We're on Facebook, we're on Instagram, we're on LinkedIn. Why isn't the department that keeps me and my family safe also there with me? And why aren't they keeping me informed? So I think we saw the delay between social media getting widespread adoption and it getting true social media emergency management government adoption. There was a lag there. And I think now we're seeing those PIOs and those information technologists who are like right at the midpoint in their career, they're seeing AI as the next coming of social media emergency management, of AI and emergency management. How do we adopt and meet that challenge? And how do we use this really great tool, but also avoid the liability pitfalls of misinformation, bad data, releasing too much, unredacted reports, or putting officers in jeopardy? So there's a real balancing act, I think, as they're trying to tackle those things.
Well, and you mentioned lobbying. What are some of the biggest objections or barriers that right now you see in implementing AI in the sector?
Old people who don't know how the internet works. They're the
Okay,
worst.
so
They're
just education, or not, the language and communicating what this is so that you can put legislation in place.
Yeah, I think there's two pieces of. I mean, the joke is like it's old people who don't know how the internet works, which is absolutely a subset of the challenges that I
Yeah,
think we all kind of face in AI policy
it's a
as
human
consumers,
journey.
even like as business owners, but also in public safety. And then on the other side, there is the minority report risk that everybody really is worried about. Like, how far can a predictive model go before it's impeding and infringing on our constitutional rights, both from a personal liability standpoint? At what point is my house deemed too likely to be habitable, but it's my right to live there? At what point, are the statistics laying out, everyone's worst fear about a minority report error? And so I think those two fears, of misunderstanding and of the potential of overreach, kind of are pushing back at each other right now. And in the middle, though, is an opportunity to use AI to predict wildfires to save communities, is an opportunity to use AI to predict heart attacks and the right place to take a stroke victim or a trauma victim versus making the decision in the field. And so we have to balance. And I think education and awareness is really, really important as we're kind of tackling this from that lens.
We're seeing increasingly more real world implementations of AI in business and government. What are some of the success stories that you've been seeing so far?
I think one of the most interesting intersections about where AI is really having a role in public safety, specific to law enforcement right now, is in body camera analysis and report writing. So police
Okay.
officers spend a significant part of their day writing reports, which are super necessary. They have to sign an affidavit. It's part of the criminal process. It ensures justice for victims. And at the same time, there's a question of whether or not, if a computer is analyzing what happened and telling you what you swear happened, is that truly you swearing to it? And if a computer is part of the process, is what the computer was trained on part of what is swearing to this affidavit? And it's this new frontier in what is going to be appellate law very, very soon, because there are major companies who are using, and major departments who are using AI report writing that takes a transcription of the body camera and it helps the officer write the report. And the officers are writing better reports, which are almost assuredly helping more crimes be solved and prosecuted. But there is going to be a criminal defense attorney out there, and I've talked to some in the space, and they say, well, yeah, but is that really the officer swearing to it, or is there some amendment of information that's coming to the table there? And so I think we have to figure that out. But it's also such a great opportunity because we're all fallible as humans. And I think about this, you take the law enforcement side out, because I think that's a challenging hot button issue sometimes. And I think about my role and my time as a paramedic. I was on a paramedic engine company. We carried all the medicines and all the interventions that you could do in an ambulance except for narcotics. And we would be on calls doing really interesting medical stuff for like 45 minutes. And then at the end, I would have to go back and swear to a report of exactly what time I gave what drug, how much I gave, why I gave it, where I gave it, what happened afterwards,
Like
and you
that.
do the best you can, but it's not perfect. And so if we could use the power of AI to help adjunct those reports and improve patient outcomes and continuity of care, what a great opportunity to save lives.
Oh, the
So
efficiencies. Yes,
be
exactly.
huge.
Now, again, I want your role in, from like a CFO level standpoint. managing change across organizations, whether it's government or not, it has growing pains. And so, what from a training standpoint are you seeing being deployed in whether it is a government organization or a company to manage this change in an ecosystem, and learning new digital tools and AI models?
Speaking internally for us as a company, it keeping up is a challenge. I mean, we have a
Mhm.
team of 8, and keeping everybody on the same tools and the right track and the right prompts, is
Yeah.
in itself almost a full-time job. But I tell our team, and I tell the same thing with the public sector unions and that we consult with, and the chiefs and officers that we talk to who work with us. You don't have to do everything. And you don't necessarily have to do something, but you shouldn't just be comfortable doing nothing. And so if you haven't figured out exactly where AI is going to save you 5 hours a week, that's okay. It just means you need to pick a place and try it and see if it can, and then try to build off of that. And I think so, like whether or not we're using an AI note taker in meetings, which sometimes is helpful, sometimes not.
Yes.
Whether or not we use the AI autoresponder in our emails, that like puts them into categories and makes them easier to get through at the end of a holiday weekend, or whether or not we're just all the way in and we're using it to manage our pivot tables and spreadsheets and looking at voter data. I think that as long as every week you're trying to get a little bit better and trying to keep up with it, you're probably doing 10 times more than everybody else. And that's always been a good policy in public safety, try to learn something new every day. And I think that in corporate governance or technology right now, I think it's a really, really great strategy is to try to learn a little something new. I mean, what Google came out with 3 new tools last
Yeah.
week, I think.
It's
So
like
no one,
it's impossible to keep up, so to your point, one step at a time, just keep learning.
yeah, and find what's the most useful to you. I mean, I haven't spent a bunch of time in VO3 because I think from an authenticity standpoint, public safety isn't in a position to use generative models to create videos. We're not
Yeah.
there. But we do a lot of analysis, a lot of data, a lot of tracking, a lot of predictive models, and it's just been a huge opportunity, and it's saved us a lot of time. And I think that as anybody in public safety or government is really looking at this, you have to say that you are balancing liability, but there is a liability also of being so far behind that you aren't able to keep up and you're not meeting the expectation of the public that you serve. And so I think it's really, really important to try to keep up with those things, but don't get overwhelmed.
We do like to interview people who work a lot with government entities as well as business owners, although we do think of our primary audience as business owners, but the parallels between governments and businesses, just as organizations, there is plenty of overlap if you kind of Venn diagram it out. And so, as far as AI and safety in government, business owners also have uh, concerns with safety as well, right? So if you're a restaurant, you want to make sure that the food is safe to eat, right? Or if you're a manufacturer, you don't want any on-site injuries, as well as just the products coming down the conveyor belt. You want them to be safe for the end user, right? So what should business owners know about how AI is reshaping safety strategy in general?
I think that right now, if I was a business owner, especially somebody on a manufacturing line, AI gives your humans more points of data, better, cleaner, and faster. But it's really important, I think, today that we keep the human in the loop. And it's not that we won't get to a point one day, perhaps, where we could have slightly a larger span of control with less human taking in more input that's even more processed. But right now, I would really look at AI as like that extra set of eyes who's helping you focus. It's the highlighter on the page, but you're still having to read the book.
Yeah.
It's the cliff notes of the story, but you still have to absorb it and give the presentation. I think that's where I really see it personally, because there are such great risks for business owners and liability of getting it wrong. And so we have to use it as a tool and an adjunct, I think, to our thinking today, and not necessarily as the final decision maker. And I don't think that the final decision maker is like too far away. And we're not talking, centuries or decades here, but we're not quite there in January of 26. And so I would really encourage, like, adopt it. Use AI to put the box around the dangerous thing. Use AI to blink red when it sees a trend of something that you're alerting about. Use it to monitor gauges, or known hotspot areas of concern. But don't fire the guy who's responsible for consumer safety or employee safety right now, who's watching all those cameras, because their judgment is still, I think, really necessary. To do it, we just help them do their job better and at a higher level.
That was such a great answer. Thank you. You're mentioning practicing and then also just learning. What publications or websites are you consuming to try and keep up, as well as trying making sure that, your portfolio of learning for AI is really kind of spread across AI models, if you will? Is there anything that you're going to or consuming weekly?
I don't, and I'm really terrible at this. Like, I'm the absolute worst about this, because, like, I feel like 80%, and like most statistics are made up on the fly, but like 80% of the AI newsletters are written by AI that's reading AI that was written by somebody else's AI. And then most of those people who are consuming them are consuming a summary from another AI reading it. And at that point, I'm just like, eh. Um, I I like to just scroll the internet. I am a doom scroller. At the end of the day, the
Okay.
last thing that I want to do is think. So either I'm watching a really bad rerun of an old show in syndication on Hulu, or I am just flicking through the pages of the Instagram and the TikToks, and the people who are out there who nerd out way harder, they can summarize this stuff in about 30 seconds. It's pretty cool. And that's where I keep up to date, because it's more entertaining to me. I literally, I'm the consumer, you
Yeah.
know? And I find that that's so much better and more organic for me to absorb than reading a summary of an article written by someone that summarized something else, which I know is not like a
Great.
super great flag for, someone's newsletter or whatever, but truly, I, I like to doom scroll, and I like to see it, and I like to see the example, because oftentimes I'm like, oh, that will work for our clients. That'll work for public safety or police or fire or EMS. And then you're like, that's cool, but we're not selling skincare, and that's okay,
Yeah.
right? There's so much in AI, and that's all
Well,
right.
and I also enjoy, trying to cultivate my algorithm to show me, AI updates and, just be intentional with what I am clicking on and reading, because that is going to help curate my feed. And I appreciate that. I appreciate getting content that is curated for what I want when I'm, cognizant of that. So I can relate. There's several accounts that I really get my news from when it comes to AI, because I like the way they deliver it. They meet me with where I am.
I completely agree. And I love how you talk about curating your content feed, because I
Mhm.
think that so many people don't realize is how many other places large language models have influenced our absorption for a while.
I know.
And so having an account dedicated to, like, this is where I scroll to learn about work, and this is where I scroll to watch cats with lasers riding griffins, right,
Exactly.
is super important, because they can't be the same.
Yeah,
But the
exactly.
algorithms are so much better than we are at searching. They're so much smarter than we are at finding what we're actually looking for, which is why I buy stuff off Instagram, because Instagram is like, you know what this guy needs? He needs a Valentine's Day present. And boy, do I have a great one for you. And it surfaces some good ideas. I'm like, my fiance, I love that. And I, I appreciate that level of giving,
Mhm.
from the internet. And it's also why, I'll say, I do give some credence to the concern that this is why Gemini is flying so fast versus Perplexity and OpenAI and the Claudes, because it's consuming all of our search plus all of its learning. And I think that putting those two things together is creating a monster. I don't know if it's an evil monster, a good monster, or a friendly monster. Maybe it's Sully from Monsters Inc. I don't know, but it's
Okay.
definitely a big, gigantic monster that's being created. That's giving us what we want. And so I want to learn about something in a particular way, I think it really feeds that in a really good way. From a public policy perspective, I worry about people ending up in bubbles. And I feel like this conundrum is where AI is today. There's so much good. There's a little bit of risk. And I think it's important for us as consultants and advisors and strategists and people, who public safety or business leaders are looking to, that we're always able to say, hey, let's be real. Super great opportunity, really powerful tool. concern of brand damage, personal liability, failure, issues. Here's where we want to try to strive to be. And you can't let fear of bad stop you from this huge opportunity, but you can't just go willy-nilly blind into it and think that the computer will figure it out every time.
You need your guardrails. And
Yeah.
to your point earlier, you're the trainer, you're the coach. It's a tool. And so, that's really important to make sure you understand the guardrails and the game you're playing. And so I couldn't agree more. There's so many, even companies that just jump right in and they don't set policies with their team or even guardrails. And I mean, you see it on the news. It can get really ugly really fast.
And I love that you mentioned that, because what I would tack on there is that that story is exactly why companies have to contact experts and institute policies and plans today. Because if you don't, your employee is control C, control Ving into their own model. They are
Exactly.
absolutely using it to help them as a tool, but it's outside of your purview. So if you want to be safe, saying no and putting up a wall is not the way to be effective, efficient, or safe, I don't think, in 2026.
And I think it's bringing to light too other connectivity and systems in place for companies that aren't talking to one another or aren't going to be able to integrate. And that is bringing, conversations at an executive level to the surface of, okay, well, before we do this, here are safety measures, even from an integration standpoint, that need to be put in place.
But it still reminds me of when social media launched. I remember when we were doing a hashtag SMEM, social media emergency management. And every Friday, all of these Twitter nerds would get together from across the country and we would tweet on this hashtag about what was the latest way of reaching people or finding people in disasters. And we were doing geo targeted searches to find people talking about a tornado or a hurricane or a fire or a flood, to find them, to get them access to resources. And
Oh
we were
my
setting,
gosh.
and we are
Yeah.
doing, it was like
How
really
cool.
neat, like leading edge stuff back in like 2009 or 10.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
And at the exact same time, the bosses of the fire department and police station and the Office of Emergency Management were across the country generally opposed to using social media because that was a no-no. And I would argue that there were lives that were lost. There was a public safety delay there in getting it. And then FEMA stepped in and they created classes that taught, no, don't be scared of the Facebook. It's okay.
Yeah.
And I think that we don't have a FEMA class yet on AI. We don't have a emergency management class on looking at how to use AI and predictive models yet. We have some really great partners in the fire service who are doing great work talking about wildfire prediction and are putting out maps and apps and information to people. Hasn't quite adopted the full AI circle on there yet. I feel like consistently that's been a problem, and I don't want us to fall back into that era again if we can.
And well, and I think again, one thing that I've noticed in Louisville is our city is really being progressive about talking about it and leading the change. And we just appointed an AI officer, which I didn't even recognize a lot of, cities haven't done. So, that to me is exciting, but it's also, when you're watching that, it's us stepping into a spotlight and it being new. So, how do you feel like, from a community standpoint, are leaders stepping up and not leading with fear, or are you seeing that still kind of hesitation with taking the lead in AI and government?
Oh, there's still so much fear. It's fear, and it's also that there are policies and legislation and rules that are already preventing people from adopting so many things. And so we have to unwind policies that were written for a WWW social media era, for the large language model era. We have to unwind and adapt those policies. And we have to find ways to be safe but not restrictive to progress. The idea of hiring a chief AI officer is great, but making sure that they're fully empowered and
Yeah.
making sure that they're in a position to work with policy committees and legislative writers, because it's not just local policy that gets affected there. It's also, there's state laws that govern
Yeah.
the release of information and how soon and how fast. And as people realize that government could theoretically do things faster, they're going to expect more. But the more also costs money. Even
Yeah.
AI, even the simplest thing does cost money. And so where do those funds come from? And we can claim it's from efficiency, but for some period of time, it's not going to be. And so we have
That's
to
going
move
to be a
forward,
whole nother podcast.
right? Yeah.
If you just had to add an AI product or solution to your wish list that could improve safety, not just in government, but organizations like businesses as well, what would that product be?
I don't know that it would be a product per se, but I will say the most important thing to me personally right now in AI, that I want um, all of us to adopt. I think whether we're consumers or business owners or tech leaders or at every level, is we have got to take a position against human trafficking and sexploitation that is powered by AI.
Oh,
And the fact that at every level, from most corporate governance of AI companies in many ways to the level of the highest forms of government across the world right now, that has not yet become a demand is really concerning to me. And there is no other argument, in my opinion, or any other more important thing for us to safeguard. We talk about safeguards and guardrails and best practices, but there should be no greater best practice for us all to subscribe and agree to than that we can't use models to take a picture of a child to do horrific things,
yeah.
and that we can't take pictures of people who don't want their picture taken or used in an explicit way and used that has got to be the bare minimum of our safeguards. And I really hope that as tech leaders and as business owners, as people who use the products, that as the time progresses, we're able to make those demands and get the companies who run these models to take really strong positions
And
that
I
prohibit them.
agree. I agree. And for it to be a priority.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's such a simple thing to do, and it's not today, and so it grinds my gears a bit that it's not. I really think now that we have secretive models that are using backdoor APIs to modern models without guardrails, living in the background, I think that creates the worst, most greatest concern for our own personal safety, for individual safety, and for our community safety. So we've got to really address that, I think.
Well, Brayden, thank you so much. This has just been so informative. Hopefully, that we'll get a 2.0 version with you and have you back because we could have talked for an hour on everything that you do. So, thank you so much. If people want to find you, where is the best place to contact you?
Yeah, thanks for having me. So you can find me personally at bradenframe.com. And then our company group is cartographersgroup.com. And, we work with just about anybody who's on the right side of the world, trying to make the world a better place.
And we will certainly put those in the show notes. So
Yes.
thank you, Brayden. We
Thanks so much.
appreciate it.
Thanks for coming on.